Alright, what's up everyone? My name is Rudolph Schindler. I'm so sorry I cannot be there with you to tour my beautiful home today, but I did want to tell you a little bit about myself and my work and the house that you are about to see. I personally was born in Vienna in 1887, pretty middle class family. Um, I went on to go to the Polytechnic Institute in Austria. I learned a lot there about architecture and about art. I also met this funny guy named Richard Neutra, who was going to become a pretty big piece of my life later on. I really knew I wanted to study architecture when I was at that university, and I saw Mr. Frank Lloyd Wright's portfolio, the Walsmith portfolio, and I thought, wow, this is what I want to do. So in 1914, I hopped on over to the great city of Chicago in hopes of working for Mr. Frank Lloyd Wright. It took me a while. I was quite persistent in messaging him, and eventually he took a chance on me, and I got to watch over his office here while he was off building the Imperial Hotel in Japan. I did a pretty good job with that, so then he said, hey, guess what? I'm building this house for Mrs. Barnstall. It's the Hollyhock House. This is the year is 1920, and, do you want to help me oversee construction? I said, yes, Mr. Wright, I do. And that was a pretty great time. We quite bonded, I would say, over this. Finished that up, and I thought, well, I like Los Angeles. I've gained some trust in the community. I'm going to build my own house. And that was the Kings Road house that you all are going to see. I built it as a personal residence. And, well, I went on to do many more things. And then I unfortunately died in 1953 of cancer. But that's my whole life. Let me talk to you a little bit more about my architectural style. Talk a little bit about my personal architecture style. I think the name speaks for itself. Space architecture, as I called it, was really about creating a more pleasant relationship, openness, interior of the house in an era where the construction and the form of the house was being much more focused on by many of my colleagues. I would consider myself a modernist and a main player within the modernist movement, but I also feel that my spatial architecture style delves a lot deeper than many of the others at the time, especially through my desire to connect with nature. I also really felt connected to Los Angeles and tried to utilize the different aspects of the environment, the light, the wind, the temperature, the rain, the hills in all of my designs, and creating gardening that really worked with the houses to bring that into the inside. I did a lot of my construction myself. I oversaw all the construction. I really met one-on-one with all of my clients to make sure I was designing exactly what they wanted. I did some pretty influential stuff. I did a lot of unique work with concrete and this sort of plaster skin, which is the coating over the concrete that I came to be known for. Unfortunately, people definitely appreciated my designs in my lifetime, but they did not receive the critical acclaim that many of my colleagues did. In 1932, the MoMA did an exhibit on modern architecture, and none of my works were included in that. And I also was not asked to participate in the case study program, which is another hallmark of that movement. At the end and sort of after my death in the postmodern era, I did receive more recognition from the architectural community, especially with youngster Frank Gehry, who I'm sure you all know, citing me as one of his main influences. Onto my house. While I was working on the Barnstall house for Mr. Wright, my wife Pauline and I took a trip over to Curry Village in Yosemite, which is a really unique system of sort of permanent tents And I was quite inspired by this living situation that was very communal. And I thought, why not kind of replicate this, but for my wife and I and our friends, the Chases? So I designed this house. It's sort of a three-pronged pinwheel. There are four separate rooms or studios that are arranged into two apartments for each of the couples. There's a common domestic room in the middle that's quite light that serves as the kitchen. There is a guest bedroom off to the side, and then quite a unique sleeping arrangement with these two covered terraces and sort of hanging beds on the roof for sleeping because it's Los Angeles. As I spoke about earlier, I used cement in really creative ways to create this house. The foundation of the house is just one large cement pour, which also serves as the floor of the house. This was also quite an economic choice that I made. And then the way that the pinwheel is shaped allows for a lot of nature and gardening to really interact with the house, and a lot of glass paneling also allows for that. The tilt slab construction is something that I really brought onto the scene, which is when you pour a slab of concrete and then you kind of bring it up using a pulley into place as a panel of the house. And then I also popularized the use of bar sash windows, which sounds like quite a fancy term, but it's really just a window that has multiple panes running through it, which helps with stability, but can also help with that sense of space. You couldn't guess by the design of the house, my wife and I were swingers. We served as a sort of salon and breeding ground for a lot of art and political movements around that time. Some of the people who lived there included Anne Freud, Sigmund Freud's daughter, and Edward Weston, the famous photographer. One of the longest couples that we had living there was Richard Neutra and his wife, who I mentioned earlier. A quick side story about my relationship with Richard Neutra. We met in Vienna, we studied together, we had a shared love of Frank Lloyd Wright. They came to live with us, and our lifestyles didn't exactly gel. We were a little more bohemian, they were a little more rigid. And then we decided to collaborate on a design for the League of Nations Palace in Geneva. Although our design was not officially chosen, it did make it pretty far, and at one point my name was suspiciously removed from the design. And that definitely created some tension between us, as I blamed Neutra, obviously. There was also some tension over the Lovell couple. I designed a beach house for them, and then I slept with the wife of the couple, and so they decided to go with Neutra to build their house in Los Feliz, and that ended up being one of Richard Neutra's most famous achievements, the Lovell Health House. Quite a beautiful house, but I would have liked to have had that commission. We eventually reconciled before my death, shortly before my death, but I would say that our relationship was definitely some of the biggest drama of the architectural community around that time. More works I completed in my life. The Pueblo Ribera Court in La Jolla in San Diego is a group of 12 duplexes I completed shortly after my own house. They were unique, and they had sleeping porches on the top level, similar to my house. The Howe House in Silver Lake was also unique in that I created the house at a slant to the street. It's not facing either of the streets it's on the corner of. The Lovell Beach House, which I mentioned earlier, many more of those bar sash windows. The Wolf House, my friend Liz's personal favorite, on Catalina Island, beautiful tiered design. It was unfortunately demolished in 2002. The Elliott House in Silver Lake, beautiful. The Rodriguez House in Glendale. If you've seen the movie Pineapple Express, you might recognize this house. And the Tischler House was one of my last in Westwood. Yeah, take a look at those if you're interested. And thank you so much for listening to me, Rudolf Schindler, discuss my life and work.